In this video, I'm going to talk about all of the variations that the Mehta method has that an intermediate to an advanced solver should aim to learn to be able to compete at the highest level. What I expect you to know already is what the basics of the Mehta method are. The beginners video is linked in the description, and secondly, the full Mehta algorithm sheet is also linked in the description that you might find helpful to follow along with the video. Again, this is not a tutorial, this is just a walkthrough of all the different variations that exist in the method. And basically this is an algorithm based method, so you should on all steps have a decent option select and pick the best one out of them to get the best results out of the method. So let's get started with the most basic, the most vanilla version of the method, the way the method was originally intended to be done. So the first step is always going to be to solve a first block. So I see a pretty decent case on green. So let me just solve the green first block. So I'm done with the green first block. And now the next step is to solve the 3/4 of the E slice, which, let's see, can be done like this. So I have solved 3 edges on the E slice and we are left with one slot, and the edge that goes in here is right here. And now we have 4 algorithmic steps that follow one after another. All the 4 algorithmic steps algorithms are in the full Mehta algorithm sheet. So this step is called EOLE, which stands for edge orientation and last edge. So while we are putting in this edge, we are also supposed to do edge orientation. This particular case is in the first column and it has only one oriented edge. So it's the 8th row and the algorithm goes like R2 U prime F R F prime R2. So what this did was it inserted the last edge while orienting all of the corners. The average move count of this particular step is under 6 moves. I think it's under 7 moves if you include AUF. It's like 6.4, 6.5. And after this step, we're supposed to do the next step, that is 6CO, that is orienting the 6 corners of the cube. To recognize this step, an advanced solver should try to predict some of the corners while doing EOLE, because the EOLE recognition and the algorithm execution are extremely simple. So some of the corners orientation you can already predict before the EOLE, and that will help you recognize what 6CO case this is. So again, the 6CO algorithms are in the sheet, and this particular case can be identified by the orientation of the 2D corners. So this one is pointing towards R, this one is pointing towards B. So this is basically in the RB column. That's, I think, the last column in the sheet. Yeah, the RB column is the last column in the sheet. And the 4 corners on top are all not oriented. So it's in fact the last case over here. So as you can see, these 2 corners are pointing towards me, this corner is pointing away from me, and this corner is pointing towards the left. And this is a pretty long algorithm. It goes R prime U2 R U prime R2 U2 R2 U2 R prime U prime R. So what this does is, while preserving EO, it also orients all of the 6 corners. Typically, the 6CO algorithms are all RUGen. Some of them are RUDgen to shorten them. The average move count is around 9, and this should leave you with a cube that looks like this. Now the next step is 6CP. 6CP recognition can be done using a recognition system called LHCPR. LHCPR is given in the introduction. The link to LHCPR is given in the introduction page of the full Mehta algorithm sheet. Let me just identify this case for you. So basically what we have here is both the D corners are on the top layer and they're adjacent to each other, but they're not correctly permitted with respect to each other. So this is the 3-2 column, and in the 3-2 column, if I put both of them at the back, then these 2 are the same color and these 2 are the same color. So that is the 3, 4, 5, let's see. Oh, that is the first case in the 3-2 column. Okay, so now the algorithms that we are supposed to use in 6CP are actually the red ones. The black ones were the ones that were generated earlier in an earlier version of the method, but since then slight improvements have slightly modified the way the last step is supposed to be done, and for that the red algorithms are the ones that lead you to the way that we're currently going to use it. So I'm going to use the red algorithm, and it goes like u prime r2 u r2 u prime d r2 u prime r2 u r2 d prime r2. So what this will do is it will permute all of the corners, and you'll be remaining with the permutation, a permutation of the last 5 edges. Now the last 5 edges is a fairly simple step. If you don't have a green corner on top, then it's an EPLL. If you have a green corner on top, then you can just recognize the case. This case is very easily recognizable. This looks like an H perm, for example. So the algorithm for this goes as u prime, and then you insert this edge here, and then you insert this edge here, and you're done. And you're done, basically. So the way it is intended to be done is you do L5EP on the right side. Basically, the DR edge is the one that is unsolved, and so the algorithms that you will follow are the ones that are on the columns that say right, and the front and the back ones are for different versions of the method, basically. So yeah, this is it for the basic version of the method. Now let's talk a little bit about a different way L5EP can be done. So let's once again solve the first block. So let's just do it a beginner way so that I don't have to spend time in inspection. So okay, so I am done with the first block. Then I am done with the 3/4 of the belt, and then let me solve EOLE. Then we have 6CO. Then we have 6CP, and yeah, right around here. So what we have at this point, suppose this is the case that we get after we are done solving 6CP, and this is the L5EP case that we get. So this case has an algorithm from here, which is like RU2 R2 U2 R2 U2 R, I think. But another way that you can do this is you can do the adjusting of the D face earlier. So what that will do is it will put the unsolved edge at the back, and now instead of using a right L5EP alg, you use a back L5EP alg. So in this case, the back L5EP alg goes like this. It's basically an H perm with a cancellation. So that's a different way of doing L5EP, where instead of doing L5EP then adjusting the D face, you first adjust the D face and then do L5EP. This increases the number of algorithms, but sometimes it may be helpful because some of the algs are better when they are RU-gen and some of the algs are better when they are MU-gen. So you can make a decision based on this. Then there are a couple of other variations. So suppose again solving the first block in a very inefficient way, then solving 3/4 of the belt, solving EOLE, solving 6CO, solving 6. Okay, so at this point now I have 6CP to solve. Now one thing that I can do while solving 6CP is I can basically use a 6CP alg. Another thing that I can do is, and this is a very good example of that, this particular case, is instead of using the 6CP alg, if I can in very few moves solve this entire DR block. So in this case I can do it by putting this corner here, and I can do this sort of thing. So that will solve this entire DR block in 7 moves. So that's usually better than a 6 CP, and it's fairly easy to recognize as well, because I mean I had a block over here. So this would give you a PLL. So this is a GPerm, so you can just do the GPerm. And this is basically an option select between 6 CP and another alg set called APDR. There are 38 cases in APDR. Some of them are extremely good and some of them are extremely horrible. So if you see that the APDR case is really easy, then instead of doing 6 CP, you can just do APDR and end up with a PLL. Using this as the default method is not a good idea, because firstly PLL is much worse than L5EP, and secondly some of the APDR algorithms are really not great. 6 CP on an average is really good, and there are very few bad algs of 6 CP. So this is an option select method that you could use once in 5 solves roughly, because roughly once in 5 solves 2 of the 3 D pieces would be joined with each other, and that is typically when the APDR cases are good. So that's one option of how you can do option select. So another variation of the method can be, let me solve an inefficient first block, then let me do 3/4 of the belt, and now let me do EOLE, and here. Now sometimes what may happen is you're solving 6CO, and the 6CO case is not that amazing, but sometimes the 2D corners, they can be solved in the D layer very easily. So in this case, for example, we can solve them really easily by doing R2U prime, R2U, R2U to R2, and that solves the 2D corners. And the reason this can be good sometimes is after this you can use COLL. So COLL over here is this. So you can use COLL, and that will lead you to L5EP. So instead of doing 6CO 6CP, what we did was we solved these 2 corners using one algorithm, and then we did COLL. Some of the COLL algorithms can actually be improved, but I don't think that's necessary. Anyway, so now you're left with L5EP, so you can use it, you can solve it using the beginner's way, because I don't know that case, or you can just use the algorithm for that. So this is another variation. So the variations that we looked at so far are the vanilla way of doing it, that is doing EOLE, 6CO, 6CP and L5EP on write. Then there is different ways of doing L5EP, so that you can do ADF before L5EP to possibly get a better L5EP algorithm. Then there's the variation where instead of doing 6CP, you just permute all these 3 DR pieces and end up with PLL. And then there's the variation where instead of doing 6CO, you solve these 2 corners. I think there is around 80-85 algorithms. The algorithms for those have not been generated, but then the process of being generated. And then you can follow that up with COLL, and you'll end up with L5EP again. And I believe that's it for all of the major variations that would be worth it for the method. There are a lot of other variations that we have thought of, but most of the variations are either not worth it recognition wise, or they take a lot of moves. I'll talk about a few of them later on in this video, but these are the ones that I believe, if you know, which I think sum up entirely to somewhere around 250 to 300 algorithms, which in itself is a lot already, then I believe you should be able to solve any cube in under 45 moves, and you should be able to recognize the case fairly easily. So I think this is enough to get the most out of the method. Now there is another variation of the Mehta method. It's basically analogous to the way ZB is related to CFOP. This method is related to Mehta the same way. It's called Mehta TDR, and I'll talk about it. Okay, give me a second. Yeah, so solving the first block, then solving 3/4 of a belt, and then doing EOLE. And at this point, instead of doing 6CO, what we do is we solve this entire block. So in the COLL variation, what we did was we just solved these two corners, but in this particular variation, we solve these two corners and this edge. There are a total of around 380 algorithms for this, and I mean, that is already a lot, but almost all of them are RUGen, almost all of them are sub 10 moves long, and they're fairly easy to recognize because all you have to do is you have to look for the three pieces that have the bottom color. And I mean, I don't know this case, but let me just solve an intuitive way. So what I did was basically I solved these three pieces. You typically use an algorithm to do that, and after that you'll end up with a ZBLL on top. Now I of course don't know all the ZBLLs, so let me just do OLL and PLL, but you get the idea. So this variation is called Mehta TDR. I'll give you an example solve that has been prepared with this method. So, okay. Here is the example solve that I've prepared. So over here, let me just breeze through. So I made a first block on green over here, and I made 3/4 of a belt. Now at this point I do EOLE, which is FU, F2, or FR. Okay. Yeah. So I did the first block, I did 3/4 of the belt, and I did EOLE. Now the three bottom colors are here, here, and here. So for this particular case, the algorithm is R prime, U prime, R, U prime, R prime, U2, R prime, U prime, R2. So this seemed like a fairly bad case because these two pieces were connected but not in the correct way, and this one was stuck at the bottom. But again, the algorithm was fairly good. The algorithm was 9 moves long. It was completely RUGen, and it had only one R2 and one U2. All of the other ones were quarter turns. So the algorithms for this case, at least the ones that I have generated so far, are really amazing. And we end up with a ZBLL. So the ZBLL for this goes like this. And then we adjust both the faces. So this particular variation has a total of around 900 algorithms. So that is a lot of algorithms. But if you don't mind that number of algorithms, then the benefits of this method are immense. Firstly, the number of moves that this method is going to take is somewhere between 40 and 43, and that is without influencing the steps that come one after the other. So for example, sometimes you can influence the 3/4 belt during the first block, so that will reduce the number of moves even further. The way I simulated it was separately doing first block, 3/4 belt, EOLE, and so on. And secondly, the recognition is very good for the TDR step. The algorithms for the TDR step, at least the ones that I've generated so far, are amazing. And ZBLL is an alg set that has been researched much more than all the alg sets that I have talked about so far. So you'll find very good ZBLL algorithms and great ZBLL recognition techniques all over the place online. So this is the TDR variation. I don't think that an advanced solver needs to learn this to be world class. If it is possible to be world class using this method, then the variations that I talked about earlier should be enough for that. But this is just one step further for people who are interested in doing things that are beyond what other people can hope to put efforts into. Now, what I want to talk about finally are a couple of trick subsets. So the trick subsets are basically a couple of easy TTLLs or a couple of easy Hawaiian Kosiemba PLLs, or some commutators that you can do. So sometimes what may happen is after you're done with 6CO, you may end up with a 6CP case that has two of the D layer pieces already solved. So that means that you will be remaining with an alg set called TTLL, where basically permutation of the top layer is remaining and this corner is remaining. And if it is an easy TTLL case, then instead of doing 6CP and L5EP, you could just do one TTLL alg and be done with it. Of course, this won't happen very often, but I mean, it has decent chances of happening, so why not just learn a couple of easy ones. Then of course you can have both of these corners solved when you're doing after you're done with 6CO. So that'll leave you with PLL on top and this piece unsolved, so that is Hawaii and Kosiemba. So that's an HKPLL. As far as I'm aware, HKPLL algorithms are not that great, but again, you could learn some of the better ones and hopefully skip one step. Now there is one more variation of the method that is honestly more suited for FMC than for speed solving, but you could experiment with it, and maybe if you get good with it, then you could probably do it once in a while in a speed solve and get a really low move count solve. So I have prepared an example solve with it so that I can give you a better idea of how it's done. I'll do the first block without explaining how it's done, and so basically what I did right now is I solved the first block, I solved the belt, and I did EOLE. So now I have edges oriented, and now at this point we would typically do 6CO, or if we are doing the COLL variation, then we would solve this corner and this corner, or if we are doing the TDR variation, then we would solve this corner, and this edge. But another way to go about this is to actually solve all of the edges, and this can usually be done in 3 to 4 moves a lot of the times. I mean, I think 30 to 40% of the cases are when after this point you can solve all of the edges in 3 or 4 moves. So over here, this edge belongs here, this edge belongs here, and this edge belongs here. These two are already solved. So you can solve the edges using R2, U2, R2. So that has solved all of the edges. There's an offset of a U2 compared to the E slice, but I mean, that doesn't matter. And what that can do is it can give you a corners only case. Now there are a lot of corners only cases, but if you sometimes see that the corners only case is has only 4 corners remaining, then you can memorize all the 4 corners only cases. I think there are 30-40 algorithms for that, so you could do that. Or if you're doing FMC, then so far the solve has taken 17 moves, and this was done completely linearly, and the first block was not very efficient, honestly. So this, I believe, should give you a good idea of all the things that are possible with the Mehta method at a higher level. It's important to note that since there are very few intuitive steps in this method, most of the things are algorithmic. You're gonna see a very quick initial improvement, but then the improvement is gonna slow down once you're sub 15 or sub 12, or at least that's what I predict. And the improvement after that is going to come by minimizing the pause between 2 subsequent algorithms that you're going to do. So an important skill to have when you are using this method is to predict the next algorithm while doing the current one. There are ways people do it already. So people use the CP during OLL to predict what kind of PLL case they're going to get, and that reduces the amount of PLL recognition time that it takes for them while they're using CFOP. And similar techniques are available for this method. In fact, they're slightly easier than the OLL to PLL transition, but again, they will require a lot of effort, and the more algorithms you know, the more difficult it will be for you. So what I personally recommend is you not go beyond the variations that have been discussed in this video, unless something really great comes up later on, and just drill those things till you're hopefully a world record holder. That's it from my side.